Afternoon. This is the City of New Ulm Safety Commission meeting for Thursday, October 6th, 2017. I will call the reading of the minutes. Do you want to, if I have a motion to waive the reading, that would be fine too.
Would you like me to read the minutes,
Yes, if you
Mr.
would,
Chair?
please.
Minutes from the Safety Commission meeting of September 7th, 2017. The minutes from the May meeting were read by the Secretary and accepted as read. Old business, there was no items on the agenda. New business, correspondence from Police Chief Whelan regarding a citizen's request for intersection control yield sign at First North and State Street. Commission was supplied with email, aerial photo, and Minnesota Manual on Uniform Traffic Control guidance for intersections. Discussion was held on the issue and motion was made by Don Allendrung to accept the correspondence and file. Motion was seconded by Charles Mitchell. Motion approved by members present. Ms. C. Miller requested time at the end of the meeting on the above issue as she lives in the block where the issue arose. She has a concern of accidents that have happened in the presence of children playing near this intersection. With further discussion on the issue as an awareness issue, it was suggested that a letter to the editor may help bring attention to the intersection issue. Second item, correspondence was received from Shelley Bauer, New Ulm Area Catholic Schools, requesting modifications of on-street parking restrictions and signage on 6th North Street between Washington and State Streets and on Washington between 5th to 7th North Street. Commission was supplied with correspondence and aerial photo. Following discussion and with input from Kurt Curry, the street superintendent, a motion was made by Don Allendrun to recommend approval of the request for change in the signage. Second by Angela Forster. Motion approved by the members. The next meeting, then the meeting was adjourned. Next meeting is October 5th today.
Any additions or corrections? Not, the minutes will be approved as read. Old business. On April 13th, 2017, a recommendation was made to conduct an engineering study of North Highland Avenue at Center Street and Oak Street. City Council to consider contracting with a consultant to provide a study at their October 3rd meeting.
Mr. Vice Chair, I can comment on that. I wanted to bring the Safety Commission up to date on that. The City Council did authorize to enter in a contract with WSB and Associates, they're a consulting firm in Minneapolis, to conduct the engineering study at both intersections. Just got the contract signed before I came to the meeting and had some email correspondence. Their plan is to put out the traffic counting devices probably next Tuesday, be in town late Monday, get all the information gathered. They need to be out for two solid days in order to gather enough information, and then kind of go from there with developing the reports and the warrants with regard to those two intersections. So I don't know if you have any questions that I maybe can answer.
Anybody? I think we'll just await the results of the study.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, the anticipated schedule would be to present this to the Safety Commission the first meeting or the meeting in December, and take it to the City Council in the second meeting in December. So that's the anticipated schedule at this point.
Okay, thank you. Second item under old business was on October 13, 2016. Recommendation was made to authorize a transportation alternative application to fund the installation of a rectangular rapid flashing beacon on Broadway at 4th South Street. This was tabled by the City Council in January.
Mr. Vice Chair, this particular item I put on the agenda because we're at that point in time where the TAP, or the Transportation Alternative Program from the federal grant process, is available for reapplication. The Safety Commission made the recommendation to the City Council, and as we got through the process, in I believe early January of this year, the city had to commit to the project if the grant was awarded, and also pick up 20% of the cost, as well as the maintenance on the useful life of the equipment. And at that time, this city council requested that more information be gathered and presented. I think Ms. Winters had, after that, done some surveys along with the help from Region 9, and she has some information here I guess she could present if you'd like. Then I guess the ultimate question is, does the Safety Commission feel that you want to recommend that the City Council reapply for this grant money to construct that rectangular rapid flashing beacon at 4th South and Broadway?
So do you have a presentation?
Hi, Cindy Winters with the Heart in Your Own Project and the Safe Routes to School program. So the City Council did request additional information. They wanted to know whether they felt, whether that, for lack of easy term of saying it, the RRFB would be used at that particular location. So a survey was done for individuals that lived in that area, and the questions, we had 4 different questions that we asked them. We wanted to make it short. Well, I actually had 5 questions so that people would answer the question, and it was done electronically and both mailed out to individuals as well, and we had 289 people that completed the survey. And one of the questions, the first question was, would you or your children use a pedestrian activated crossing light if one was installed at South Broadway and 4th South Street? And 106 people said yes, 138 people said no, and 24 people said maybe. The second question was, would you or your children use a pedestrian activated light if one was installed to access amenities on the east side of South Broadway, such as the dog park, St. Mary's Church, downtown, daycare, etc. And 111 people said yes, 135 people said no, and 37 people said maybe. And then the third question was, it was the same question, but would they, for people on the other side of the street, would they cross Broadway to access the schools, library, hospital, park and recreation, daycares, etc.? 115 people said yes, 137 people said no, and 26 people said maybe. And then they were also asked what intersections in town prevented them from either walking or biking to amenities that they could easily access by walking or biking. And Garden and Center Street were mentioned, and that was the #1 intersection that was a problem. Anywhere on Broadway that doesn't have a light was the second one that was listed. 5th North and Broadway was listed. Highland Avenue and Highway 14 was listed. 12th North and Broadway was listed. South 4th and Broadway, and then Center and Highland. And those were the top responses. And then the 5th question was, which streets in town are you hesitant to cross as a pedestrian or bicyclist due to speed of traffic or width of the street or a combination of both? And Broadway was listed 98 times, Center Street was listed 60 times, Garden Street was listed 38 times, North Highland was mentioned 20 times, 5th North 14 times, and 20th South Street was listed 9 times. And then the map that you have in front of you, and that is here on the camera, was put together by Region 9 Development Commission for us, and this is a map that includes all the student addresses from all the schools in UM. So it's a density map that shows you where the students that go to school in UM are located. And so it gives you a good idea of potentially who lives on the east side of Broadway that would be trying to cross the street to get to the schools that are located on the west side of the street. So there's a fair amount of students that are located on the east side of Broadway, and really close to that particular intersection that would be crossing Broadway to try and get to school, to walk or bike to school. I don't believe I had this map
No,
the last time
we
we
did not.
talked either.
Commissioners, your thoughts?
Well, I
think my opinion still hasn't changed. I think a safe pedestrian crossing somewhere between Center Street and South 10th, is warranted, so, I would still approve of this.
These people that are listed on the east side, if this was installed, would they utilize that intersection? Would they, like for instance, on 7th South, we got 7, would they utilize that or would they still cross, at their convenience?
I don't know that anyone probably really knows the answer to that question. I'm guessing their parents would really want them to cross at the light rather than at their convenience. I don't see a child going down to 10th Street, going 3 blocks out of their way to walk to school unless they want to be late to school.
Sure.
But 4th Street would get them directly.
I mean, I think it's a good idea, but, you know, if we do it, will it, people utilize it, that's what I'm saying.
Right. It was listed as a need in the Safe Routes to School plan, was to get kids across Broadway safely. Because there are students that live on the east side of Broadway that some of their parents don't have cars, they have to walk or bike to school.
Do we have a motion to recommend that the council reapply for this federal money?
Got a question. What would it all involve? What are we gonna install there?
Steve?
Mr. Vice Chair, it's I guess we didn't bring any photos or layouts, but it's a steel beam that basically goes from one side of the street to the other and has flashing lights on it and says, you know, it's activated by the pedestrian that wants to cross so that it be visible for all 2 lanes of traffic in each direction. That's what the state has stipulated would be required at that location, and the city has to get a permit from the state, so we don't have much of a choice.
The only problem with that is people see flashing lights and they keep right on driving. I see it all the time. I don't know where the area is right now, but, even while the road was under construction, there were flashing lights, going on 12 South. And some people stopped like they were supposed to, and other people kept right on driving.
Yeah, you can't legislate against bad driving, it's just the nature of the beast. You're talking about the signals at 10th South? Yeah, I saw that myself.
Yeah.
Person just drove straight through the flashing red light.
I think we all did.
So that's why I'm asking, because flashing lights, being another thing, like you drive through Gaylord, and they got a post there in the middle, pedestrian walking. A post maybe like that would probably make as much sense as the flashing lights, to my intake, my mind.
Mr. Vice Chair, I had that very conversation with the MnDOT office of traffic, and that type of system would not be applicable to our situation because we
Okay,
got
yeah,
2 lanes of
because you got a
traffic.
center divider, yeah.
That's the first thing we thought was be less expensive and maybe would work better, but it's not an option.
Well, you know, Popeye stops or slows some people down. But I don't see where it solves that problem 100%.
Well, I don't think you can solve any problem necessarily 100%.
Now where traffic is concerned.
Right.
The biggest inaction word is patience. People wanna do something, they're gonna do it right now.
I think it would be a learning curve for sure, and then maybe there could be some, patrolling or, you know, something for the first time, you know, few weeks or whatever to just kind of show people. But I think once people get used to it, they would slow down. I mean, I can't imagine it would happen like, it wouldn't be like happening every, 10 minutes. It would be, used at certain times of the day, in the morning, after school,
Right.
hot times. So,
We need a motion to,
Mr. Vice Chair,
yes,
I'm Dave Borkert. I'm a commander with the Nome Police Department.
yes.
I happen to live right at that intersection. I live at 405 South Broadway. And, as far as, I used to always kind of think on the same lines, do the people, they're just on Broadway, they're just gonna keep going, or are they actually observing things? If I walk to work with my uniform on, my police uniform, I mean, they're literally stopping, and I think they would get out and salute me as I'm walking across.
You're right.
And if I'm not wearing my uniform, they're, out of sight, out of mind, like they're not paying attention. I'm the same size, whether I have my uniform on or not. But I do think sometimes they're just selectively not paying attention where, and this would certainly be something that's enforceable. So, I mean, if they're driving through it, certainly we're not, from a law enforcement perspective, we're not gonna tolerate that. And I mean, there's a reason they're supposed to stop for those pedestrians, so. From that I believe there'd be a benefit. And I know firsthand with my son, he's in college now, but when he used to walk to school, we would have him walk, either we'd get him across Broadway as parents, and then from there we, trusted he could make it to St. Paul's, or otherwise, when he was little, we would have him where he'd have to walk down to Center Street and cross there, and just simply because we didn't trust him crossing at 4 South, and I've heard other people make the same type of response, observation, that they'll sometimes would get them across Broadway, and then from there, they just trusted that they'd be able to get to school at various ages. So, just from my perspective, I think there would be a benefit to it. Any questions? Otherwise, thank you.
No, I agree with you that there will be some benefits. But how many times are you gonna have a guy that's not gonna pay any attention to that? If you can enforce it, like you're in the police department, you can enforce something with lights flashing, right?
Mr. Vice Chair, yes, we'd be able to enforce that. I mean, and certainly if they're not yielding to a child, we could enforce that too. It's just that, you're looking at the size, the height, and, I really think there would be a benefit from the safety standpoint. So that's just my observation, my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. What are your wishes, Commissioner? Do we want to recommend to the city council that they reapply for this grant?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any more discussion?
I can see the benefits.
Mr. Chair, I don't mean to complicate the matter, but there's 2 avenues that the city council ultimately could go. You're recommending that they apply for a
Okay.
grant.
Yeah,
If they apply for the federal grant, that's available in 2022, 4 years down the line. There's also my understanding that there's gonna be some Safe Roads to School, which is a state grant money available the following year. So the dilemma is, if you apply for the federal grant and receive it, you have, first for the first application or final application, you have to commit to the project. So you receive the grant, then we're stuck with the 2022. We can't go to the Safe Routes for School. So just so you understand, the city council may have to think this through unless you want to recommend either way. But I think it would be appropriate if you want to recommend that they apply for something. So I don't know if I've made myself
Apply
clear,
for a
but
grant?
yeah.
Yeah.
You agree to that modification?
Yeah, I don't know enough about the
Yeah.
granting process and the timelines to recommend that specifically.
Okay. Motion then is to apply for a grant to install this RRFB on
Yes.
Broadway. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Under new business, we have correspondence from Brown County Attorney Hanson and the Chief of Police regarding the pedestrian crosswalk safety crossing Center Street at State. We all have correspondence and a aerial photo of the intersection. Is anybody here to speak to that issue?
Mr. Vice Chair, I could perhaps introduce it. I got both emails from the individuals and passed them on. The aerial photo from that particular intersection shows 2 lanes in each direction on Center Street, which is actually Brown County, CASA 13, and South State Street, which has a north and south leg with a stop condition. We have crosswalks painted at all 4 legs. And since that time, the Brown County engineer requested that we stripe diagonal striping on the Center Street crossings, which we have accomplished. So there has been a slight improvement with regard to visibility and the crosswalk signage. I had the chief of police forward the accident history at that location, and the chief can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have no accident history as far as pedestrians in the last 5 years at that location. We don't have any ped counts, so I can't tell you how many people are crossing at that location. Sight lines are very good, I believe. It's just probably a matter of crossing, 2 lanes and then getting to the center island. Highway 15 detour probably doubled the traffic on Center Street from May to almost the middle of September. I don't know if the people that cross there feel that it's gotten any safer since then, but that certainly probably was a condition that created more traffic at that location. So that's kind of the introduction. We are doing that R1-6A pilot study, which is that little sign in the middle of the street down on 4th South and Payne by the high school, as well as 5th North in Washington. It is just a pilot study. The commission has not established criteria yet with regard to when these signs would be installed, which you may do, determining the application and criteria for those. So that's kind of the introduction right now. We have got as we mentioned earlier, we're starting a traffic intersection study at 2 locations. We may learn something from those by December, so. If you have any other questions or anybody wants to comment, that'd be great.
Chief, do you have anything to add to this?
Nothing major to add, Vice Chair Mitchell, but again, I guess there's no real reference, but you can see the accident data that was pulled up for a 5-year period. The individuals on red, the information in red that I had sent to City Manager Gromitz outlines that in 2017, so far, January 1st until the date I pulled this data, there was just, again, a personal injury accident involving 2 vehicles, no pedestrian. In 2016, again, there was 1052 information, which is, again, motor vehicles involved with injuries. And there again, it was with vehicles and no pedestrian. And additionally, there was a motorcycle versus a vehicle with no pedestrian injuries there. So again, the close calls that are being met by pedestrians crossing, from the north side of Center Street over to possibly the probation county attorney's office. I actually can see the originating email from one of the career agents that was a near hit on Center Street there.
Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Paul Gunderson. I'm an assistant county attorney, and Mr. Hanson couldn't be here for this particular meeting, but he wanted someone from our office to come. Just to give you some context of what goes on at this intersection, there's a number of individuals who work in the probation department or the probation building, which is right near this intersection, as is the county attorney. A number of us park actually in front of what's now called the State Street Theater, or the previous high school, just because that's the closest location that we can park next to the building without being right in front of the courthouse, because that's prohibited to park there for a certain period of time, so we can't park there all day. So we park across the street and we walk across Center Street, and commonly we're walking across right before work starts, about 8 a.m. when many other people are trying to get to work themselves. So it becomes quite busy. I think people neglect perhaps to yield to pedestrians when they might otherwise do it because they're in a hurry. The same is true when we leave work. A lot of other people are leaving work at the same time. And I can understand that there haven't been any specific statistics of pedestrian and car accidents, at least in recent history, but I can say that there have been a lot of close calls. I can also say that I often wait for quite a while to cross that road, specifically because people do not yield to pedestrians. The city did recently paint the crosswalks with the cross lines. That has helped somewhat, I can say. Some people have stopped because of that. Or at least I've noticed that it's more likely that they are going to stop. The other issue that comes up is it's actually crossing multiple lanes of traffic coming both ways. So sometimes I'll get halfway across and then one lane will stop and the other won't stop. So now all of a sudden I'm creating a traffic hazard for others involved that are on the or in the cars. Anyway, it's a very tricky area to cross the street, and a lot of people do it right there. So that's, just to give you some context, that's why the request for the additional sign has come from Mr. Hanson. And I can certainly answer any questions if you have any.
Yeah, but I got a question for you. What would you consider different about that crossing compared to Garden Street and coming down to Center Street Hill?
I think there's perhaps fewer people that need to park across Center Street and walk across. There's a fair amount of parking close by to the county building that is on that intersection that you're referencing. There isn't quite the same amount of parking that is available to county employees, and so that kind of forces more of us to park in a different location.
See, my idea is that the swimming pool is down there, children are crossing from north end of town, go down to the swimming pool, there's the rest of the school periods that
Sure.
children cross down there, and the one building where, isn't there a healthcare building or something like that on the corner? Or is that,
I think it formerly was and now is the
Okay.
county building.
all
Yep.
right. But
So
is there any difference between that, besides what you mentioned, that parking?
I can't personally speak to that. I don't cross that particular
Okay.
location of Center Street very often. I have, but not as often as I do this intersection.
Okay,
I would say one difference is that there is a light at Payne Street. So there is an option of going down a block to Payne Street to cross.
Sure.
And I think school students, I think, do that.
oh, okay, they use Payne Street
Yeah,
instead of
sure.
Garden Street.
We don't have the similar, it used to be a school, and it was a crossing there for a school for many years, but.
Right.
And nothing has changed there for that, but.
Sure.
Since it's a county road, what are our options?
Well, Mr. Vice Chair, I think that if anything's gonna be installed, that the county should agree with it. After all, you put a couple of signs, obstructions out in the middle of the roadway that are gonna get hit, there's an additional liability that I don't think the city should take fully. It's the county's road, so, I mean, the first snowplow that goes by there is gonna take those out, frankly.
When is that road scheduled to be like redone, or do you know?
The last conversation I had with the county engineer, he was gonna do a mill and overlay in, I believe, 2020, but not reconstruct curb lines or anything like
Okay.
that.
Just looking at the aerial photo, you can see that the crosswalk doesn't go through the median, it might be beneficial at some point to have a kind of a median area where people can stop halfway through the street when they're crossing. There's a little bit of that if you kind of go off of the crosswalk, you can stand there, but, I mean, that might be a solution further down the line.
I don't disagree, and that's why I mentioned that maybe this intersection study at the two intersections on Highland would give us some ideas and options.
Mr. Vice Chair, Dave Workert. I'm also a Brown County Commissioner, and I've talked with the city engineer about this approximately about a week ago. One thing that I'm doing, one purpose that I attended today is when we do committee reports, I'm gonna be reporting back to the other commissioners. And I don't know, if, from past practice, I don't know what it is, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Kaler, as far as if that's something that, maybe a discussion with our county engineer and looking at logical steps going forward as far as a study. Like I said, my involvement is I'll make a report to the other commissioners and just letting them know, just basically summarizing the meetings and, certainly, this challenge or this situation.
Thank you.
And Mr. Vice Chair, I guess I'm, on behalf of, or, kind of pointing the question at Mr. Kaler, not to put you in a difficult spot, but do you know what the past practice is as far as similar situations like that involving a county road that's in the city?
Mr. Vice Chair, I guess, this is probably the only county road in the county that has this high of a traffic count. So the discussions I had with the county engineer, as I briefly mentioned, was he thought that if we did the diagonal striping, that should be enough to, increase the safety of that pedestrian crossing. Now, that was before all these emails started coming in and the other comments that we received. So he may change his mind, but he apparently sits on a safety commission or committee with the county, and that's what they had recommended. So he's an engineer. We took his recommendation. I accepted it as solid engineering judgment and did what he requested. So beyond that, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to share ideas and improvements for pedestrians and roadways. There just isn't that many county roads that have that much traffic.
Mr. Vice Chair, that's helpful. Basically, I'm just looking for, because I'm trying to anticipate potential questions that might come up at the next commissioners meeting. So, unless there's questions, thank you.
Thank you.
I have just one question. Do crosswalks have to be white, or can they be something, that neon green color that would stand out more?
Well, if you follow the Uniform Traffic Control Manual, they basically need to be white. There are some cities that do it different colors, but in my judgment, they're adding some liability exposure because it's not an accepted practice. You have an accident, I can guarantee you, you're gonna end up with me on the stand trying to explain why it's not white.
Okay, that was just a question.
How shall we proceed?
I guess I'm looking for some guidance, Mr. Kaler, about what we can do as a commission at this.
Well, Mr. Vice Chair, you can recommend what you feel is appropriate. I frankly think we've done the diagonal striping and that is adequate for this point in time, that we need to wait for these traffic engineering studies to develop and see if anything comes out of those. I don't think putting those pedestrian crosswalk signs in the middle of two traffic lanes is gonna work. It's just, they're not gonna survive the winter. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think at this point in time, we should just sit back and keep an eye on it.
Are those signs that were installed by the schools, are they intended to survive the winter? Or were they were supposed to be taken out?
They're temporary,
Temporary,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
just for that study.
That was just
For
a
the
pilot
study.
study. They have not been authorized on a permanent basis.
Got it.
We're waiting for information back on pedestrian counts and things of that nature.
You know, if anything additional needs to be done at this intersection, I don't believe those little signs are the answer to it.
Sure.
You know, whether it's diagonal across Center Street, we just dig diagonal across Center now, not State Street. So maybe if your study suggests that we put diagonal lines across State Street also, you know what I'm saying? That would be, because it says in there looking for a permanent fix, and it says these little signs are temporary. Well, to me, we did the permanent fix when we diagonal striped Center Street. That's my take on it.
We have a motion to receive the correspondence and await further information from the ongoing studies in town. Do I hear a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Anything else that needs to come before the commission?
Mr. Vice Chair, I might mention that the Safety Commission has a role in reviewing the preliminary capital improvement plan for 2018. I have been working on that, and I hope to bring that to you, the first meeting in November. And the reason that the Safety Commission plays a role is because of the Complete Streets policy that was adopted by the City Council several months ago, in that if anybody has input, they can come to that meeting and sit through the preliminary presentation and express their ideas, thoughts, concerns. So hopefully at the next meeting, we'll have that available.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
And so, move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.